morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this discussion on ACH origination for credit unions, brought to you through a joint effort by TRICORP Federal Credit Union, NEACH, and the Association of Vermont Credit Unions, whose office we're broadcasting this event from. I'm Janet Merlette, Vice President of Membership Services at NEACH. Joining me are Joe Caselli, Senior Vice President, Operations and IT at NEACH, Denise Nowinski, Director of Education and Member Relations at TRICORP. Okay, I'm just going to talk a couple of minutes about the value of NEACH membership. So NEACH advocates on behalf of its membership. As a regional payment association and a direct voting member of NEACH, we vote on all of the ACH rule changes. We also educate our members on changes in the ACH network and in different payment channels. We advise on regulatory issues, audits, risk assessments, and payment strategy. We support membership through expert guidance on the ACH rules. We also address critical payment channels that are faced by our membership. So we also work to ensure that New England financial institutions keep up with the pace of change and maintain an informed and educated staff. So NEACH representation and advocacy. NEACH is a voice at a national level. Through our participation in the national ACH rulemaking process, also, NEACH has established relationships and partnerships with many leading financial industry councils and trade groups. So NEACH takes the knowledge that it learns from participating in these groups and brings it back to benefit all of our members. So these are a list of the different groups that NEACH participates in. So with NEACH, NEACH participates in a number of groups and committees. So some of these groups and committees, NEACH also takes the lead on these. We also participate in Regional Payment Association leadership forums. So we participate in committees and work groups, and this really helps to bring back the latest cutting-edge news and updates for our members. On the other side of the screen are some lists of organizations that we have relationships with and have developed partnerships with. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Joe Caselli for our presentation.
Thanks, Janet. So I'm going to be talking about why would you want to be an ODFI. Just as a disclaimer, NEACH is a direct member of NEACH. We are specifically licensed providers of ACH education in New England. We're the only licensed provider in New England. This is just informal. This is education. This is not consulting. This is not advice. It's for educational purposes only. So if you have legal questions, you should certainly seek legal advice just for education. And sometimes Joe's opinion only gets inserted in here. So I'll try to disclaim Joe's opinion only along the way. So we're going to talk about, this is our agenda. We're going to be talking about the opportunities that exist, the obstacles and obligations, and then risk. And when you look at this, you build a presentation and you look at it afterwards. This is sort of a traffic light approach. The first section, really going to be green light, woohoo, thumbs up. Second section, kind of yellow light, little bit of challenges ahead. The red traffic light is risk. We're going to talk about risk. We're going to talk about things that could happen. Additionally, this is really overviewy. This is not, again, specific, detailed information. And it's really, if I could stress something, education, being educated on how the ACH works is really going to help you in assessing what do you want to do, how do you want to get into origination. When someone comes to you and says, oh, we got this opportunity, we're going to do X. Really, if you know the rules and how the rules apply, you may know we don't want to do X. And here's why, the 3 reasons why we don't want to do X. And finally, before I go on, we used to train I don't want to say it's in a company policy, but we used to train, when we trained about origination, we try to scare you a bit. We try to say, you know, if you're not ready for this, you shouldn't be doing this. But you shouldn't be afraid of origination. At this point, you're probably being approached by your members repeatedly for, hey, we want to do this, can you do this? Hey, we want to do this, can you do this? And up until now, you know, we didn't want to take on the risk. You can take on the risk, you can manage the risk. Be educated, know when someone presents you with an opportunity, know here's the issues with that, here's how we want to approach it. We want to touch this part of the opportunity, we don't want to touch that part of the opportunity. And finally, sorry, before I go on, I'm used to being very interactive with the camera. Not very interactive. So I encourage your questions in chat. I encourage you guys questions anywhere along the way. I'd rather have a conversation than present a training deck. Okay, so we're going to talk about the opportunities, both internal and external. Lots of times the beginning of origination starts within your own shop with applications you use, and then it goes to members. So why would I want to be an ODFI? We're going to look at, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at the screen. We're going to look at, one of the ways is for internal cost reductions that can help. You can expand your footprint by extending ACH into your operations. You're going to increase retention once a member's tied to you, because you're facilitating their transfer. They don't want to change. People are lazy. They don't want to do it. They don't want to move on. And finally, you get to offer new services. So some of the first few that you can get into is payables. And that can include travel reimbursements. How do you reimburse travel expenses now? Is it a check? ACH is a great way to do that. Vendor payments, we're going to talk about this more in the next slide, but vendor payments does offer an opportunity to pay your vendors electronically rather than checks. Paying them electronically, there's lots of benefits to there. Just a few challenges, we can talk about that. And then credits. This one is a great one, because do you have those applications where you have to maybe give a dividend check and it's 40 cents? So all the effort around distributing a 40-cent check, you can do that through ACH very easily. Collections, great one. Do you have safety deposit boxes? Signing your members up to renew their safety deposit box via an ACH debit, great way to do that. And then now we get into loans. So you have loans. Creating an ACH sign-up form for paying their loan electronically is a great way to do that. It can be a one-time payment. So here's where education starts to get into play. So if you're, for instance, setting up a recurring payment for a loan, couple of things. So first thing, let's talk about consumers. You have consumers who want to pay your loans. One way you can set them up is with a paper sign-up form, and that's going to be a PPD entry. And you see PPD entries come in. Those are debits to consumers. So you want to make sure those are PPD debits. One of the risks, this is kind of a yellow light thing. One of the risks that happen is you set up a program, and this is an easy win for ACH. Collecting your loan payments via ACH is really an easy win. When you have non-consumer members, those aren't PPDs. Lots of times we walk into an institution and we see that they've set up everyone on PPD debits. Understanding that a risk is involved with consumer PPD debits, a consumer can, up to 60 days after the entry, say, I don't know what that is, return it. You know, they have that right. Reg E, they're going to get that protection. But if you're setting up your loan payments as PPDs for businesses, well, now you've given the business 60 days to return that, because the rules rely on the SEC code. So being educated, when someone says, let's just roll this out to corporates as well, know that needs to be a CCD payment in order to protect yourself. So that's where education is important. You really should make it a mission for yourself to educate yourself on the rules. We do have programs. It's a great idea to have an AAP on staff, not a requirement. One-time payments. So I'm a big fan. There was a recent rule change a year ago, and the tell entry. And I hope if I'm boring you with specifics, send a chat to say, hey, knock it off. But a tell entry, if a person's late with paying their payment, you can call them on the phone, follow a script, print out the results of that script and email them, hey, you just authorized this payment over the telephone, we're sending you a tell entry. Last year, the tell entry became recurring. So in my mind, when we rolled out that rule, it's like, oh, you could get 2, that's great. You can authorize tell entries to go until they tell you not to send them anymore. So it's another way to get an authorization for a consumer debit via the phone, follow the script. If it's recurring, you need a little extra piece, but we can talk about that when you get there. And this is, I'm sorry, sometimes I skip my slides. Consumer versus personal loans. You got to be careful with those non-consumer loans, because you don't want to find yourself sending out 2 months of $10,000 debits to have them come back to you because you used the wrong SEC code. Transfer services. This is probably where you're getting the most beating down your door. I want to send money. I want to send money to I want to get money from my account someplace else. I want to send money to my account someplace else. I want to send money to my mom, my friend, my brother. This is probably where you're getting the most heat from this. There's a trend. P2P payments have just exploded, and it's almost like you have to have them now. You can't. Your member's gonna wander someplace else if it's not around. And again, it's not scary. You have to implement it appropriately. So let's talk about the account-to-account stuff for a minute. Account-to-account. The same process we just followed for the loan debit, you can follow for me taking money from someplace else. So I'm a consumer. I'm going to walk in. You're going to sign a form. You need to have an authorization in place. The authorization needs to be clear, and it needs to include the part where it says my account someplace else. Because if, for instance, your member wants to debit someone else, you've just jumped. They're now a full originator. You need an origination agreement. You need exposure limits. When I send money to myself or pull money from myself, I'm not an originator. It's an account-to-account transaction. You can do it with an authorization. So it's important to know in the part where I'm either sending money to myself or pulling money from myself, it's my account. It's clearly identified as my account on the other side. Does that mean they're not going to use it to send money to someone else? Maybe not, but you've protected yourself by when you find out, hey, that's not your account someplace else. You can't do this service. You have actions you can take afterwards. Is this account sent money account? Sorry, reading my slides. Sorry. Yes. So this slide just finishes talking about once I have that transfer set up, I'm not going to want to move it. I'm not going to want to change it. It's going to work perfectly for me. Sometimes, so one way to do this is online. You may have a software add-on to your online banking that allows you to do it online. It could be done in the branch with a piece of paper. Either way works. Operations is probably going to take it in the back and handle it anyway. So I skipped P2P payments. P2P payments are really popular. There's a new rule. So just as a heads up for you in your audits, not part of the presentation, the rule changed in March. So optionally, ODFIs could send P2P transfers as web credits. As an RDFI, and you're all RDFIs, you have a requirement to post information from that entry on the statement. And it's different than any other requirement we have so far. The individual ID field, which we never do anything with, it's on the entry, we never pass that to a statement. That in a P2P, a web credit, P2P transfer, has the sender of the transaction. So as an RDFI, if you're getting those now, you need to be passing those to your statement. So you need to go back to your processor, your service bureau, whoever's helping you with this, or your statement people, and find a web credit. You probably have one. It's really likely that you got one already. make sure your statement's fine, because you as an RDFI need to be compliant with that. Okay, end of commercial. For P2P credits, starting in March of next year, you have to send them as web credits. So there's a little bit of a learning curve there. Again, I'm going to tie it back to education. Find out what the requirements are so you can go to the people that are going to help you implement the solution and say, did you meet this? Check. Did you meet this? Check. Yes, this is all going to follow the rules perfectly.
Joe, can I interrupt quickly?
Please.
When you said it has to go via web, no longer P2P, if they did a P2P, what would happen? Would it bounce back?
So
would it go?
It becomes technically you're in violation of the rules. You're non-compliant with the rules. You would be subject to NEACH rules enforcement, which it could be serious. That's one of the groups we sit on. We're in a funny phase. So what NEACH found when they implemented P2P was it was all over the place. Some of those entries were going to CIEs, they were going as PPDs, they were going, there was no standard to it. And one of the tricks, and lots of times a rule develops out of a compliance issue. OFAC, IATs, sorry, I know bad words, but they developed over a requirement that OFAC, you weren't screening international transactions for the bad guys. So NEACH implemented a rule to meet that requirement. There is a requirement when someone sends money to someone else, you have to identify them. There's no place in the current CIE, PPD to say who the sender of the transaction is. So for example, say Credit Union X was sending P2P transfers. It would say Credit Union X is sending the money. Credit Union X wasn't sending the money, I was. So I was never identified. The new P2P rule allows the sender to go into the individual ID. It's from an ODFI perspective, it's not required yet, but it is required as of March of next year. The trouble is when someone jumped and said, oh, we're going to do them now, they're formatted correctly, your statement requirements as an RDFI aren't being met if you're not pulling that information correctly. I just did an audit and I found that the statement wasn't right, even though all the information was there. That answer the question?
Certainly does. Thank you.
Please interrupt, love them.
Yep.
Okay, so external payments. Payroll's probably the next. You should probably start with loans. You need a team. This shouldn't be operations only. This shouldn't be cash management only. It should be a team. You should have representatives from all across the credit union that gets on your team, so hey, we're implementing this right. Was there a requirement Is there a requirement Let's make sure we have it all covered. You're going to do that internally. Then payroll is the next great application to go to. Why is it great? It's great because you're sending a credit out. You're not sending debits out. You're never going to get back an unauthorized credit. You probably have non-consumer members who want to send out payroll. It's an easy win. You can set up your procedures, and we'll get into that a little bit later. That's a great way. Another one they're probably beating down your door for tax payments. We want to pay our federal taxes via the ACH. We want to be in control of sending it. We don't want to let the government come in and take our money. So that's probably where you're getting it. Another easy win. Once you've established that baseline of here's how we originate, here's all our procedures around origination, here's how we check the files, here's how we make sure the money's there before we send it out. Once you have all that down for your internal stuff, you can go and offer that service. The next one, you're kind of getting into a little bit of an issue, because now, you could totally screw up an authorization for a payroll credit. I get paid, I'm never going to complain, never going to happen. If you mess up a collections authorization form, if you have the wrong words, if it's not clear and readily understandable as an authorization, you could run into trouble with, again, NEACH, rules enforcement. Unauthorized entries, there's a 1% rule on getting back unauthorized entries. Now, unauthorized entries could simply be the authorization process is just flawed. So you want to make sure that the originator, your member, understands all the authorization requirements. And again, when you're doing collections, depending on if they're consumer collections, your time frame for risk can go out 60 days. They can come back that long. Vendor payments. So this is one of those things that ends up on a slide because it's an easy win. But if you've ever actually implemented this, it's not an easy win. Vendors, they want a check. Send me a check. I'm going to deposit a check. What's this ACH thing? I don't know anything about ACH. Business-to-business transactions are not on the rise as far as growth goes. The business community, from business to business, there's certain applications that are given their ACH transactions, they go through automatically. And there's some, send me a check. I want a check. Check is just as fast. I convert it. It's just as easy. It's a hard sell. The Fed several years ago, Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, implemented, great idea, looks great on the slide, we're going to pay everyone electronically. It became a chore because they had to convince all the companies to accept an ACH item. You know, if you asked, we have an accountant at our office, Carol. If you said to Carol, hey Carol, go give them our account number and our routing number. Right? You get that, why would I do that? She's not an ACH person, she's an accountant. She's not interested in that. So it can save you a lot of time, it can save you a lot of money, it's very reliable, you can time it better, you know when the payment's going, you know when it can clear. EDI, I mentioned that a minute ago, you can send a ton of information in an ACH transaction. You can send the information about the payment. If, for example, it was for all your locations, the electric bill, you can say which location was it for, all within that EDI information. So it's got a lot of benefits. It's a little bit of a harder sell. You're nodding, you agree?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yep.
So this one's interesting. So NEACH is not only a trainer of ACH transactions, we are a trainer of check transactions. And I've recently gone through a certification process and kind of a fan of checks now. You know, they used to be the evil, they're the enemy, but I'm kind of a fan. So this quote, Bank of America estimates, and I'm sorry to read, Bank of America estimates a business check can cost an aggregate of $4 to $20 based on the price of the check, shipping, plus the time and employee. That is true. I do believe that you can reduce your cost, that cost. And it's a hard cost to get to because it's not just how much did the check cost to make, it's all the time related to it. There's certainly going to be a substitute cost of how long does it take to make an ACH file, but I'd argue that an ACH file is a lot faster than a check. So there is a motive. I think your biggest motive is your members are banging on your door for the service. Okay, remember, now we're at the yellow light. What are the obstacles? So now you get into the nuts and the bolts. How does it work? You know, ACH looks great in a book, but how do we get the file to the operator? How do we create a file? Who keeps that file? You know, is it in a NEACH format? So many places I go to today when you do an audit, they get their report and say, here's my ACH information. I'm like, yeah, that's not all the information. It's my report. ACH files are very specific. They're 40 years old. They're a certain format. When you get to this level, unless you have a great software package, you need to know how does the ACH file formatted? What goes into where? You need to start knowing things like my immediate destination and my immediate origin. So again, you need to educate yourself on what are the requirements around this. You're going to get bombarded by all the solutions out there. You should start with someone you know. If you already have a core processor, ask them, do they have options for us? Can we use something you produce to do this service? And then what are you going to do with exceptions? So there's going to be exceptions. You know, some days I feel that the ACH is all about exceptions because that's all you're handling. What went wrong? If it goes right, nothing happens, it goes, end of story. But what happens when something gets returned? What's an R13? Why did I get an R13? I don't even know what an R13 is. All those little, and an R13 is that you messed out the routing number. And the Fed got it and said, I don't know where it goes, and they send it back to you. But you need to know those things at this point. And what is SEC codes? I talked a little bit about SEC codes throughout the presentation. You're going to need to know your SEC codes. You're going to need to know the appropriate SEC code. What should I be using for what application? It's important. And it's really important because in the beginning, when you're setting this up, management, and I hope management doesn't get mad at me, management's probably coming to operations and saying, we need to implement this. We need it done. And you're in there, you're part of the team. Later on, some other department is saying, oh yeah, we just implemented that. And operations finds out as they're implementing, and you have to scramble because they're not using the right SEC code, they're not taking care of the right authorization. So as a message to management, include operations throughout the process, not just at the end. And as operations, know your rules, know your SEC codes, know the requirements, so you know when to raise the red flag and saying, no, we can't do this because. It's really important. It'll save you later, save you a lot of trouble later. So obstacles for transfer services. We touch on the same issue. How is that file going through? Is it the same process? Are you doing all your files the same way? Or for instance, did you hire an outside party? And that outside party takes care of creating that file. All right, what happens next? Are you going to give them permission to send entries for you to the operator? That's a big issue. They now have the keys to the kingdom. They can send anything for you. Again, it's fine, but you have to have an agreement in place that says it's fine. Are they going to not send the file for you? They're going to produce the file and give it to you to send. How do you work that into your system? Just have to know those answers. There are plenty of choices. There's lots of ways to accomplish the same thing. At the end of the day, it's a 94-character file that you're going to send on. It's all the legal stuff behind that that's important. Policies and procedures. So sometimes I do an audit and there's no examples of some activity. A good policies and procedures manual that says, hey, when we need to issue a reversal file, this is what we would do. It's the difference between an I can't tell if they could do the right thing and yes, look, it's right here documented. They know exactly what they're doing. It's your basis for good policies and procedures and operations. It's your basis for how do I make sure that when Joe's out of the office, someone else can do the same thing and we don't run into a problem. It's kind of a must-have. And be complete. So be really thorough on deciding what goes in there and then fill in the pieces as you go. So again, now we just take it one more level up. We're now talking about corporate origination. Again, file delivery. Now, file delivery has a different little connotation here. How are they getting you the file? Is everyone going through the same process, or did a company A say, oh, no, our accounting software creates an ACH file for us. We're going to use our accounting software to create the ACH file. Okay, fine. How are you getting me the file? How is that secure? Do I need to expect that file at given intervals? Or are you just going to send me a file whenever you feel like sending me a file? You just need to establish how all of this is going to operate. Sometimes there's a cash management software that has a component, and they're going to log into the cash management site to upload the file. So maybe it's not an upload file. Maybe you've set up, this is what I've given you authorization to do. It's a PPD credit only. And you're going to fill in everyone's name and you're going to send payrolls. Maybe for collections, I've given you a CCD debit file only. It could be templates like that, or it could be an upload file. If it's an upload file, and I think this kind of gets into a little bit of detail, but if it's an upload file, remember we talked about SEC codes? If you've given them the right to send PPD credits, when you get that upload file, are you checking that that's the only thing included? Is it the things you've given them? Or did they decide, oh, our software vendor from our accounting program said we can do tells. We're doing tells. Or someone came into our office and filled out a form and we formatted it as a web because they really wanted to pay over the web. You need to follow the right authorizations. You're responsible now for your originators following the rules. If there's a violation, NEACH is going to come to you. They're not going to come to your company. They're going to come to you and they're going to say, you're responsible, here's the fine. And fines can be substantial. Fines they start right around the $1,000 mark, but they can go to 0 to 100,000 if it's really a big offense. And with everything that's going on in the environment today, payday lenders and all that, not just sometimes jumping to this is a class 2, it could be up to a $100,000 fine. So again, you need to make sure you have all your systems locked down and your originators are doing what they're telling you they're doing. Not to scare you. This is not to scare you. This is, you can do this, you just need to dot your I's and cross your T's. Credit management policies. This starts to get into how exposure limits. Once you set up a corporate originator, you're going to establish an exposure limit. That should be a deliberate process. That should be case by case. How much does this originator get as an exposure limit? We're finding that sometimes we're implementing, everyone gets $1 million. Why? Do they use $1 million? Even if you've set up an exposure limit of $30,000, a year later you go and see, oh yeah, they send $1,000 a month. Why am I giving them $30,000? You need to protect yourself from an exposure limit.
Your monitor, Joe, is cutting off the bottom of the slides, but
that's okay.
Viewers are seeing the whole thing.
Oh, great. Yes, thank you. Thanks. And again, I'm a very interactive guy. Please, questions. I love your questions. You too.
Yep.
All right. Now we're in the red light district. Well, sorry.
I don't think so.
Wow.
It definitely came out wrong. We're in the red light area. So risk management is an important area. Once you start to get into origination, you need to be aware of the risks. There are more risks than what we look at in the ACH. So we look at just several risks. We look at credit risk. It's a little bit of what I was talking about with exposure limits. We look at operational risk. Your procedures are going to help with that. So let's talk about credit risk. So risks are unique to credit transactions originating on behalf of your account holders. So what model are you going to use for origination? The ACH allows you to submit a file. That file could be from a company, and it could have, hey, here's everyone we want to debit, and at the very bottom it could say, and credit us. That's called a balanced, some people call that a balanced file. It's not, it's a balanced batch, which immediately gets you into trouble. Because if, for instance, you're sending out PPDs, and the last entry in the file is a debit to the company to fund the PPDs, what did we run into? We run into the ability for the company to say, return that entry 60 days later. So a balanced file would be a file with 2 batches that's balanced. So here's my batch of credits. It's everything I want to pay someone. And here's the debit file that I'm going to debit myself. And that's going to be a business-to-business transaction. We're going to be control. So that's one way that's happening. Is that the best way? Probably not. The best way is that it's called a good funds model. If you're using payroll, the credit union would take the money ahead of time. So why allow the credits to go out the same day you get debited? If there's no money in the account, there's no option to take those credits back. Those credits are gone. The failure of the originator to fund that account is not a reason to take those entries back. So you could do an unsecured loan to your originator by sending out all those credits and having the debit reject. So what we talk about is one of the options is pre-funding. So you set up a process where you take the money from your originator Tuesday, Wednesday, you know the money's good. And pre-funding has different models. One of the pre-funding models is you hold the money in their account. Another one of the pre-funding models is you actually take the money. You have to decide for yourself which model you want to do. Taking the money for yourself is probably a good idea, Joe's opinion. But you're going to have your relationship manager come into the story, and they're going to say, well, no, we like John, and John's good, and so you're going to have to fight that battle and find a balance of where you want to take your risk. But that's a good funds model. Debits. So debits have a different risk model from credit risk procedure. Debits can have, if they're consumer debits, for instance, they have that 60-day return time frame. So the risk isn't that, for example, when you're sending out that credit file and say it was a balanced file, your risk is that you're not going to get funded for that. So if that was a balanced file and went out, your risk is 2 days, because that debit can come back for 2 days. When you're looking at debit origination, it can go 60 days. So you may send the file out, you're going to give your originator all the money, and then time goes by. And all of a sudden, those entries start trickling back as unauthorized. So first, NEACH is very intent now on unauthorized entries. The rate of unauthorized entry is 1%. So 1% of either the dollar value or the transactions, if those start to come back, NEACH is going to know. They talk to the operator, they see your volume, they're going to know. If it's higher than 1%, they're going to come knocking at your door, and they're going to say, explain this. That rate's dropping to 0.5%. So you need to be aware in knowing your customer, knowing what business they're in, knowing what their authorization process is. So maybe it's not that they're kind of on the edge of okay. Maybe it's just following a bad authorization process. The people getting the debits don't know what the debits are because it wasn't clear that the company's Joe's Auto Body and it's coming out as JA. I don't know what JA is. JA appeared on my statement. What's JA? And why is it so much money? You forget that you had a car problem and they debited you. So that time frame can go 60 days. I didn't touch on contracts. You need to have an agreement in place, originator agreement in place with your originator. And I think I may touch that in another slide. Anyway, you need to have that piece in place that says if you stop being a customer and you're originating debits, you still have to maintain X amount of balance for 60 days to accommodate all those returns coming back after they're no longer a customer of yours. You just need to protect yourself. Again, not scary, just need to protect yourself. So again, we have operational risks. Operational risk is you face it today in your operation. It's contingency planning. It's how do I make sure things don't go wrong? How do I make sure things are processed on the right time schedules? So there's lots of ways to timing files. You could have a calendar. So we get an argument on that because, and it's really your choice what you want to do. One argument is I want a calendar because I want to know when that file's coming in. And the other argument is I don't want a calendar because I don't want to be responsible if he doesn't submit the file. Both are valid arguments. You'll have to decide for yourself which one you like better. You should have an expectation of what their activity is, on what basis. We once saw a fraud that actually skipped through everything because the bad guys mimicked exactly what the guy was doing. So this in itself isn't going to mitigate any fraud potential. But what happened is they were used to a $6,000 payroll file at an appropriate, a given period of time. The bad guys took over the $6,000 file. They sent it out in the same time frame. So the originator looking at I just got an email that a $6,000 file went out. Oh, that's right. It might be a day early, but that's okay. They didn't actually take the time to look at their file. So they have responsibilities just like you have responsibilities. Formatting of the files, again, you're going to have issues with formatting files. This can be alleviated from if you pick a package that formats it for you, if you've done all the testing in advance, if they're going to upload a file to you, you can eliminate those issues. Staffing procedures, this is where the procedures come in. You're going to cross-training is really important at this stage, and I know sometimes it's really a small number of employees, but if you can't cross-train, step-by-step procedures so that I can walk over when you're in Bermuda and press the right buttons so everything gets processed appropriately. IT is going to be definitely part of this process. It should become part of your contingency plan. You should test it as well. Compliance. So you have a compliance risk. This is one of the other risks that ACH looks at. we look at BSA, we look at OFAC, we look at all the regs. Is anything you're doing going to violate a regulation or a rule? If you're in your agreement or in the setup process, you need to find out, okay, these transactions, are any of them going to go over to another country? So that's a different thing. That is origination of IAT. I can tell you from grilling the entire New England area, no one yet is sending an IAT. Just like I'm a fan of TEL, I'm a fan of IAT. So don't be afraid of IAT. I'll stop there. And again, authorizations form. So this is one of the places where you're going to be responsible for the authorizations of your originator. You don't have to get them, you don't have to get copies of them, but you need to be sure that your originator understands this is the type of transaction I'm doing, and this is the type of authorization I need to have. I need to provide that authorizations maybe if I get asked for it. There's a rule change that just went into effect last week. So it used to be the RDFI could only ask for a copy of an authorization on a consumer entry. If they came back to you and said, oh, we need a copy of an authorization on that corporate entry, you could say, no, not your right. It's now their right. And it's little bit different. They have the right to ask, and they can get a copy of the authorization for the corporate entry, or you can give them the contact information of your originator. It's not intended to be a rules violation. It's intended to help the corporate receiver to go find out what it was for. That's it. It's not, you're not in trouble. If you don't actually provide it, it's not a reason to return the entry because you breached the warranty. It's a rules violation. They may complain to NEACH that you didn't provide what you're supposed to provide, but it doesn't mean you have to return the entry. Fraud. So I jumped into fraud in operations. Sometimes people say operations, fraud risk and operation risk are the same thing. We treat them differently. So, you are entered a different area of ACH when you are originating. There are things you're responsible for. So having proper security procedures in place with your originators, what are you requiring of them for fraud protection? You can be as specific as you want. You can say you need to have the latest latest virus software. You need to have a standalone computer that does your ACH. You need to have, it's going to be outlined in your security procedures. It ties back to UCC 4A. Your legal guys are going to get all over this. If they say, no, I don't want to do that, you need to note that. So when the bad guys break into their system and take all their money, you can say, this is where you said no, you didn't want the security procedures. Sorry. And I know, so our members, NEACH members are all types of institutions. I know credit unions like their members more than regular banks, so sometimes that's hard for you. There's a legal line where you need to decide where you're going to take a loss and not going to take a loss. This is that place, and again, I'll feed that back to you, how you want to address that. Unauthorized entries, how are you going to handle those? Bad actors posing as legitimate originators. This is probably where we see a lot of problems. It's not probably, it is where we see a lot of problems. Called corporate account takeover. This is where all the steps you've taken, setting up, how are you going to send me the file, is like, we originate ACH as a company. So we have a two-part process. I'm the only person in the whole company that can create an ACH file or can upload an ACH file. Janet is one of two people that can sign an ACH file. I can't sign it, she can't create it. There's never going to be a process where someone steals my credentials and can do a fraud on the company. Same thing for Janet. They'd have to compromise both of us. Could it happen? Yes, it could. But, are you going to require dual control? Sometimes it's hard. Your originators are going to push back and say, there's only 3 of us in an office. How can we do dual control? But again, a decision you're going to have to address. Third parties. So here's where your members are, I don't want to say fooling you, but fooling you. They're not telling you the full story. So where does this happen? Happens in a couple of places. Probably happens in more than the places I'm going to say, so you need to be vigilant. But one of the places it happens is your CPA firm. And your CPA firm is doing payrolls. And all of a sudden they start using their account with you as as originations for different companies. It's not their payrolls. So them sending out the payroll entries, it's not for the benefit of them. It's the benefit of their company, their customers. And in that case, it's very likely that that CPA firm is a third-party sender. They need to make their originators follow the rules, just like you need to make your originators follow the rules. So you need to make sure that they have those agreements in place prior to originating for them. The second place we see this, and this one is trickier, and this is where you probably want to bring in your legal counsel because your customers are bringing in their legal counsel. It's property managers. Property managers manage multiple properties. They want to use their account to collect the rents for all the other accounts. And it's a really tough situation because sometimes they want to be signers on all the accounts. So when they're signing the agreement with you, they're signing the agreement for the other company. It gets very tricky. Just be aware of third-party senders and really identify who's the entry for, who's it for the benefit of, is that for the benefit of company, is that my member or is that not my member? And be aware that there needs to be other steps in place prior to origination. Internal fraud, it's not like something we like to talk about, but you need to have controls in place to make sure files don't get altered. It's like that Richard Pryor movie where he's stealing a penny off of every transaction. How would you prevent that? What steps would you take to realize something's going on, the entry's getting changed after it gets here? I hear almost no stories of this. I can't remember the last time I did hear a story of this, so you're probably good. But what controls do you have in place just in case? And then this, that same story, bringing that down to your companies. Companies are not financial institutions. Companies are not credit unions. So what happens when the president of a company puts his password on a sticky note on his computer, and the temp who came in happens to take that sticky note and submits a file and tries to take all the money of the company? What steps do you have in place to identify that and to educate your member on don't do that. Don't have that process in place. Dual control helps, but when you get that guy banging on your door saying there's only 3 of us here, I don't want dual control, you need to be aware of that. Strategic risk. So this is probably why we're actually doing this presentation now, because you can't ignore this anymore. You're getting too many requests to be originators, to send files. The failure to implement an origination program, you can't ignore it anymore. I think you may, again, Joe's opinion, I'm going to put it on Joe's opinion. You need to be doing this and looking at this now. Even at any level, just to start the process so that you can add to your portfolio of origination pretty quickly. I can't remember going on an audit, and I go on lots of audits, where someone hasn't said, oh, we're starting A to A next week or next month or next year. Oh, we're starting P2P next year because the members want it. It's just they're banging on your door. You need to answer. Becoming an early fine, not adhering to the sound. Yeah, and again, this is kind of a wrap-up slide, I guess. It all ties back to you have to know the rules, you have to know the procedures, you have to have all the players in the credit union involved in the process. It can't just be the sales folks, the lenders, operations. They all have to work together to understand how to implement something appropriately, because you're getting requests from all over the place to do this. Questions? Ask them now.
I've got one. I know this is supposed to be about education. I'm not detailed,
Mm-hmm.
and not in the vein of a sales pitch, but I guess when I hear you talk about all these things, if a credit union comes to me and wants to start doing this, I'm gonna turn to you guys, to NEACH and or payments-based advisors for help. I know you can't do anything for us from soup to nuts, but can you just talk a little bit about the resources that are available? I think it's important, whether it be webinars, teleseminars, consulting. I just think that just to talk about resources, not so much in the vein of a sales pitch, but what's available, because you can hear a lot about risk, you can hear about exposure limits, agreements and things like that. NEACH is a great resource, and I think just to talk about that for a minute would be important.
Okay, so just to repeat the question in case they didn't hear all of it, what resources are available from NEACH in particular, and what's out there? So we're an association. We are very much like, I think, you as far as associations go. We're not about bottom line and I want to get everything I can from you. So the first approach I would take is, if you have questions, contact us, call us, because we're gonna lay out what you need to know, where you need to know it, and who can provide it, what we can do, and what we can't do. So NEACH, as an association, we have a lot of education. We have education for origination. We have all about audits and how to know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing from an audit perspective. We have solutions. One of the parts of the rules is keeping your originators informed of the rules. Well, how do you do that? Are you sending someone out to all your originators to inform them? We have a solution that you can, online training, train your originators on how to stay informed of the rules. And it's in their language. It's not anything like I said today. It's really, what is an authorization? What's it used for? How does it work? Now, we've recently formed a joint subsidiary called Payment Space Advisors. And from Payment Space Advisors, they are a for-profit subsidiary. They can do the soup to nuts. They can do everything from a conference call about the first steps you would take to actually setting up your operations with you. So it's a new company, just started in March, but between the resources we have on staff and the resources that the EastPay, who joined us in this venture, has, they can get anything done that you need to do. I had
I think
another
you mentioned too, Joe, is that like over here you have the Association of Vermont Credit Unions, then you might have a Payment Space Advisors like a QSO.
Yes, yeah, that's what they say. So I don't know enough about QSOs, but that's every time we talk about it, they say, oh, the credit unions will know. It's like a QSO, and I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know what a QSO
But
is.
it gives NEACH, well, through a subsidiary, the ability to do greater and more things, but some of it falls into a taxable service.
Right.
So you have to form this, but it's still NEACH in under a big umbrella in a sense, who you are, what you do.
So that's the one piece that was really advantageous. So when we go places, we're an association, we have a mission. I have to give the same advice everywhere. I can't tell you specifically about your operation because that's against my charter. I don't have to do that at PSA. I'm also a PSA advisor. When I'm a PSA advisor, I can tell you everything. I can talk about what works, what doesn't work, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, specifically for you. And there's lots of issues, and that's why we formed the subsidiary. There's lots of issues when we're an association. You can't do that. Yeah, everyone gets the same advice. Everyone gets the same information. I can't give you anything different. But we really can do anything with the subsidiary. And we have. I mean, we've done these things slightly in the past. We can do more now with coming in for 2 weeks to set up, here's everything you need, soup to nuts for origination. So it's nice.
And that was the reason for my question. I think you can listen to a lot of this stuff, and I know you say it's, this is not the reason not to do it, but it's a lot coming at you. And I guess all I'd like to say is that there's an excellent resource that can really walk you through it.
And you can start with the association, because we're going to answer every question you want to send at us.
Right, and that's a good point too, to remember to call our ACH Rules and Compliance hotline. And you can call anytime. Anyone within the credit union can call and ask us a question.
And in addition, twice a year, TRICORP has, in conjunction with NEACH, we have somebody come over and gives an update of the latest rules, new regulations coming out, always talks about risk, always lets the credit unions know that you are an ODFI now if you do returns.
Right.
So you need to follow the rules, and you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very informative. Like I said, twice a year. It's ACH in the fall, ACH in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
So that's available as well.
Excellent. Am I handing it over to you?
I guess you must be. Well, on that note, Joe was very informative about how you become and why you want to be an ODFI. With that in mind, TRICORP does have a product, and I too am very with my hands, so you will see them moving around a lot. I apologize for that. I'm very French. But TRICORP does have a product that not only allows you to receive, but it also allows you to generate and transmit payments. This product is called ACH Connect. It is very affordable, very efficient, and very easy to maintain. There's no software to install. It's a seamless transaction flow. There's an OFAC scan integration, meaning if you want to scan a particular file going out, you can. Don't have to. But if you've got concerns regarding it, you can. If it's a file that has a one payment, you can also do that as well. So that's built into this, I'm not going to call it software, but it's built into the product. So it's a nice piece as far as the risk part of doing ACH payments go. And the final thing about keeping that member relationship is that you, as the manager, have the complete control over who, when, and how much origination, how much limit the access to for that employee, the particular employee that you have given this capability to be able to do. For example, someone could only be able to approve up to $1,000. Someone else can be able to approve up to $250,000. And that's all they can do. Someone else can be able to input and approve. They cannot do both on their own. It's always a dual approval. But what's nice is you have that control. You can determine exactly what happens, who can do what, and for what dollar amount. One of the things that's nice, and Joe did mention this, talking about, oops, sorry. Oh, I thought I advanced my slides. We'll go one more time.
Ooh.
Sorry, I know, I got creative.
Yeah.
I think I have to press it again to get my little thing going up. You can do one-time payments or recurring payments. What's nice about the product is you have a collector. He's calling at night. He's calling a member. You know, you're late, you've been late. Oh yeah, I got the money. Can you do this? I got it here. Fine. The collections person can take the money out and do that one-time payment. Very nice, very convenient for you. You know the member's got the money. They've just gotten busy. They've been away. Something happened. Other one-time payments, Joe gave you a bunch of different scenarios, maybe a tax payment, maybe paying a travel reimbursement, something along that line. Recurring payments, we see that credit unions do their loan payments, car loans, mortgages, whatever type of loan payment you've got. You can set up schedules for these payments. You've got payments coming out on the 1st, on the 7th, on the 15th, whatever you determine, because you can preset any of these schedules yourself. You set up a template of all your members, attach a schedule to it, and on that specific date, going forward, the system will always send out that bunch of individuals that you want these payments to either be pulled in from or to go out to. What's nice about these is you can have as many schedules as you want. You can search the system for those schedules. You can modify them at any time. Somebody's paid their car loan off early. You can take them out of that schedule. It continually rolls into the next month, into the next year. You don't have to do anything to that particular schedule other than monitor your members. If they've paid something off, then you need to obviously take them off. Like I said before, the product is dual control. That's one of the securities. It's a given, period. Somebody sets up the template, somebody sets up the schedule, someone else needs to approve it. Somebody sets up the one-time payment, somebody has to approve it. Nice feature as far as risk goes.
Mm-hmm.
This all goes to what Joe had said, enhancing your member relationship. You are entirely right, Joe. If you can't do it, nobody's ever told you that before.
I like that.
But you know, your member's going to come to you and ask for it. If you can't do it, your comment has to be, well, you need to go to the other financial institution. They can do it for you. It's not fun to do because you hate to send them someplace else. You want to have done it. I'm not saying this is easy, but NEACH can help you put this together. TRICORP can help you set up your schedules, set everything up. It can be done, and you won't lose that member, and they'll think, wow, I can do this here. I can do anything at my credit union, which is nice. That's what you want them to do. Mm-hmm. You want to keep them a member of you. What's nice about our product, and in order to get into it, you cannot go into the product with your password and your login and all of that without having gone in and used our fingerprint reader. Everybody who is set up for a user in the product must have a registered fingerprint. It's convenient, very easy to install. It's given to you upon coming onto the product. It has an intuitive interface, meaning what's nice about it is you can't steal it. The password's not written somewhere. You can't borrow it. Can I use your password today? You can't copy it. No one can, like I said, steal it. It's your fingerprint. It's you. It's backed by Digital Persona, which is a leader in fingerprint-based biometric security. So examiners love it. They love this piece. It can be moved from PC to PC because your fingerprint has been registered in a database someplace else. So that fingerprint reader is what lets you get into the software. The product is, well, I'll go back to that last slide. Very user-friendly. You can contact us anytime for questions regarding what do I do, how do I do it, what do I input here. If you're interested, I can come out and do a demonstration for you so you can see how it works. I like to say it's a great product for you to have. Some of your DP systems do offer it. I do know for a fact that our system is a little bit less expensive, more affordable for you, offering the same capabilities, if not some even more, a few better security features. But that's what we have to offer you, along with our NEACH seminars in the fall and the spring. Even though you don't use our product, you can come to these sessions. They're very well attended. People are very well entertained by Sean.
Oh yeah.
So I'll ask you if there are any questions, but if for some reason there aren't, but you think of them after the fact, please contact us, shoot me an email, give me a call. If down the road as you're listening to this or viewing this and you're like, oh, I'd like to learn a little bit more, give us a call. We'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Do you have any questions?
I actually have a question for
Sure.
you, Denise. So When you're talking about this product, is this something that credit unions would use just internally, or is this something that they could make available on their website for their members to use directly? Are there different ways it can be used?
Not on the website, no. The
Okay.
member comes in and it's an internal.
Internal, so
Use.
you're controlling
Correct. The credit
every-
union is controlling everything.
everything.
It can be brought down to the level of your business member that you have, but we have found that there have been some credit unions that have done this, and it's become more of a hassle for them. You talk about files sent to them, oh, it's not in, the proper format, and they insist it is, and they've found that they've just gone back to like bringing it in-house. You need to do, origination, you want us to originate your payroll, we'll do it for you. That kind of thing, rather than giving it to them and having them do it themselves.
Yeah, it's nice to have those controls where you could control what's being originated, the dollar limits per transaction,
Yeah.
per day.
Per
this
day.
way.
There's reports out there available to you. Your examiners come in and they'll say, who can go in there? When were they last in there? You can pull up all those reports and it'll show you who's been where, who has what access. It's very nice. There's a lot
great.
to this to this software that can be done.
TRICORP usually sets an overall exposure limit too.
Okay,
credit
for the
union.
credit
For the
union.
credit union, that's
So there's a-
correct.
Very
there's
good.
an aggregate exposure limit as well.
That's correct.
So then that could be you could override that on an individual basis
If you had
you had a
to.
If the
member
correct.
that needed a higher limit. Yeah,
That's
that's
correct.
great. It's a
Yeah.
great feature.
Sounds great.
Yeah. With that, I think we are done for the day.
Any closing comments? Are you all set?
Closing comments?
I think, as Denise had said, if you had any questions for TRICORP, feel free to contact them. If you had any questions about NEACH, membership, or Joe's presentation, feel free to give us a call or send an email anytime.
I'll say one more thing. NEACH is awesome. And I don't just say that because they're here. You can call them for anything. You've got something that's come through that you're questioning, you have no clue what it is, call. That's why they're there. They're there for you.
Right, and that's very true. We're here to support our members.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.